Welcome to Trench Diaries. Iron Coffins. Part 12.
Because we were so close, diving safely was impossible. The captain made quick maneuvers around a few bows and sterns, then a fast dash into the night through the furious seas. Death did not claim us. The good Lord himself had put his thumb between the hunter and the hunted. Immediately, Paulson launched another attack. He reduced speed, slowly turned the boat into the sea and towards the convoy, and stealthily advanced at about half power towards the side column once again. The massive ship hulls loomed black and menacing in the darkness. The inertia with which they plowed through the black waters made them easy prey. With bated breath and throbbing neck arteries, we once again approached the swaying colossi. Wave after wave hit our bridge, drenching us and causing our boat to tremble like a noble racehorse. The silhouettes of the victims rose high before us. Boldly, Paulson drove the boat towards the first column. With mounting tension and standing in water up to our hips, we scanned the sea for pursuers. But we were alone with the freighters, the furious sea, and the silent death. Then, the decisive word was spoken. "Weapons free!" Paulson yelled, and the storm snatched the command from his lips. Cairn the XO, with his left hand on the Uzo base and his right hand turning the night binoculars, aimed carefully and skillfully. He had the next shadow, not even 500 meters ahead of our bow, in the crosshairs and held it steady. 2 or 3 hoarse commands later, repeated by the man at the firing solution computer in the tower, and then the shot was fired. Afterwards, a swift change of course. The boat struck hard against the incoming sea. A destroyer cut across to port at 90 degrees. Had we been spotted? Paulson turned, showing our stern to the dangerous fellow. Seconds slipped by, then a minute. Then followed disappointment. The shot had missed. We closed in once again. 3 vessels, spewing black clouds of soot, grew like mountains before our tubes. I believed I could hear the pounding of their reciprocating engines, so close had they been. Paulson, shouting over his shoulder, gave the order to fire. It was 4:26 a.m. Cairn the XO delivered his commands in short bursts, and the torpedo hissed away. This time, an explosion tore the night asunder. Lightning illuminated, it echoed, crackled, and splattered. Columns of fire shot towards the sky. The steamer spun in a circle with a jammed rudder, and then, like a wounded animal, listed to one side and sank before the lifeboats could be launched. Another flash emanated from another one of the floating giants. In our excitement, we had gotten too close. Ant-like figures had manned a deck gun and fired wild salvos. 2 or 3 tall fountains exploded near our boat. Several shells whistled over our heads. This was our cue to race away from the spewing freighter, and we concealed ourselves behind a curtain of smoke and fog and let ourselves fall to the rear of the convoy. Then suddenly, 2 destroyers appeared. With angle on bow 0, they came at us at breakneck speed, showing us their white mustaches of the foaming sea. Paulson called the alarm. "Dive to 170 meters, hard left rudder." The furious commotion of our crash dive covered up the propeller noise of the destroyers, which were closing in on us with terrifying speed. We clung to pipes and equipment to hold our balance. That was how steeply U-557 hurtled into the endless depths. Before the escorts could split her stern, she was already down to 90 meters. 2 charges erupted in our wake, flogging the boat like a gigantic whiplash. Total darkness enveloped us for long seconds. U-557s fell, and it seemed to be the end. But the lights came on again, and Feder, the chief engineer, leveled the boat off at a depth of 200 meters. 4:40 a.m. Both destroyers had stopped. Silence above, and silence inside the hull. Our sounding man reported other propeller noises approaching. The escorts had called for reinforcements, and we braced for a long barrage. 4:55 a.m. One escort began to run up to our port side. We veered at high speed to avoid her spread. Then we heard 3 splashes, soon followed by 3 infernal explosions. The well-placed cluster slammed our boat deeper. Hydraulic oil spouted across the control room, and the steel groaned, motor relays tripped, planes and rudders jammed, deck blades jumped. As the echo of the boom subsided, someone threw the relays back in, the chief engineer reduced the speed to silent running, and all was quiet again inside. The well-trained destroyer crews above had stopped for a new probe into the depth. 5:18 a.m. Another attack began. 3 cruel detonations came at close intervals. Then another run. We sat at our stations in the twilight of our emergency lighting, biting our lips and holding our breath as the Aztec pings grew unbearably loud. Some of the men lay on the deck, staring upwards. Others were sitting and staring into an imaginary something. There was no talking, no cussing. The men showed no signs of desperation, only tiredness and stress. Hour after hour, the attacks were renewed sporadically and inaccurately. Depth was our prime advantage and our only protection, and it worked. 7 hours later, and above us they were still searching. The captain ordered fruit conserves and biscuits distributed, which was a healthy decision. The men relaxed a bit as they took on nourishment. 2:12 p.m. The latest barrage brought to 128 the number of canisters dropped upon us. But the sounding man claimed that he heard 2 escorts leave the scene. We were hopeful. 3:20 p.m. Not a single detonation for over an hour. Had the Tommies run out of depth charges? Had they abandoned their game? The sounding man turned his wheel with loving care. The entire horizon seemed to be free of hostile sounds. Where was the third hunter, though? Paulson said, "Start up the main bilge pump. Let's see whether they take the bait." The impertinent grinding sound tortured us like a dentist's drill. Though it betrayed our position, it produced no response from above. It appeared that the third enemy had also departed. 4:10 p.m. U-557 surfaced, after being submerged for 14 hours. As the captain opened the bridge hatch, he was literally thrown out of the hull by the internal pressure. Brilliant weather greeted us. We inhaled the fresh air gratefully, though a sudden abundance of it almost made us black out. The ventilators transported oxygen to the sweating hands inside the steel drum. For us on the bridge, the sun was never so red nor the sky so blue. Since the convoy had fled safely beyond our reach, U-557 raced west in search of new targets. After darkness had fallen, we radioed the result of our battle to High Command. It said, "Sunk 4 freighters, total 17,000 tons. Damaged another 5,000 tons. U-557. After a few days of calm sailing, we encountered high seas. Summer had ended, and the first gale winds of autumn lashed the waves to tremendous heights. Under a sky thick with dark clouds, the mountainous waves toyed with the boat, tossed her wildly, and kept the bridge half filled with salt water. U-557 worked frantically to stay on course and make headway. 4 days after our engagement, we reached a position approximately 300 miles southwest of the Northern Channel. That afternoon, as we traversed our old hunting grounds, I was put in charge of the third watch, which was part of greater responsibilities that the captain now entrusted to me. This watch was a harsh one. The gale, whipping the water into a milky froth, crusted our eyes and noses with salt. Our binoculars were useless. After about 3 hours on the bridge, I spotted a destroyer moving into our starboard aft quarter. I immediately pointed our stern towards the Grey Menace, increased speed, and alarmed the captain. I assumed the ship was part of the convoy's defense. The captain arrived in a hurry, secured his steel belt to a clamp at the superstructure, and put both diesels into high gear. Following orders to concentrate on supply-bearing freighters, Paulson wasted no torpedo on the destroyer, but sped away from him. Within minutes, the bouncing ship had fallen back to the horizon. For 2 hours, we tracked the escort's evasive maneuvers, hoping she would reveal the whereabouts of the convoy. At 3:20 p.m., Werner, who continually plotted the enemy's zigzags, identified a general westward path. The convoy had to be south of the escort. After another hour of battling giant waves, we saw a smoke-blackened cloud on port. Once again, we began the hunt, keeping contact with the steaming herd at a distance of about 10 miles. When Werner relieved me on the bridge, I lowered myself into the tower and then dropped into the hull. Here, the humidity was 100%. Waves were showering salt water through the hatch into the metal deck every time. I went to work feverishly on the chart table, plotting our course. Condensing moisture dripped from overhead plates, pipes, and ducts onto charts and paper. My parallel ruler did not slide, nor did my pencil write. Water sloshed around my feet to the rhythm of the boat's rocking. At 8 p.m., I again took my place in the starboard front nook of the bridge. The captain was at my back. Suddenly, a searchlight, very faint, beamed into the dusk to the southwest. It was only a few seconds, but we chased after the clue. 40 minutes later, shadows loomed ahead, feeble and unreal. A quick correction of course, and we surged forward on a parallel track with the convoy. Our powerful glasses revealed the classic picture of dim freighters wallowing in the blackness. We counted 17 cargo ships, but there had to be more behind the rain squall. We detected an escort port astern and kept her under close surveillance. The captain held his boat at a constant distance, while we established all target values for a midnight attack. U-557 charged forward, spreading foam and spray, while we were breathing air full of smoke and soot. The wind howled and the waves thundered above the clatter of our engines as we raced past the shadows and outmaneuvered 2 escorts with ease. The sea swallowed our small steel drum, and only the tip of the bridge protruded. Now we stood in the horseshoe up to our necks in water, tied to the boat with wide steel belts. The Phantoms rocked in several columns westward, their broad flanks exposed temptingly. Through the savage wind and throbbing engine noise I heard shouted commands and bellowing reports from below. The XO clung to the torpedo-bearing tracker to hold himself erect while aiming through it at the same time, watching the numerous targets. The final moment had come for some of the giants and for those who manned them. "Destroyer to port, 200 degrees, 700 meters. A shout, bright and clear. I startled. A look from Paulson to the aft, a quick command, and U-557 shot westward into the eerie lurking darkness of the night at rapidly increasing speed. A maneuver to port, a break to starboard, but the hunters seemed to cling to our wake. Then a course change into the surging sea. Whole mountains of ocean rolled over the bridge, pressing lookouts onto the deck, forcing us into a crouching position. But it worked. After 200 heartbeats, the destroyer had vanished. Only minutes later, U-557 ventured forth again. For over an hour we searched for the convoy, another hour, no trace of ships. It was as if the convoy had sprouted wings. We dived for a sounding. Yet the storm-lashed sea swallowed every enemy sound. We resurfaced again. Bewildered and restless, we pursued southward. Suddenly, Paulson followed a hunch and set his boat on a southwesterly course. Dawn broke, and with the new day, the wind shifted and a stiff breeze came from the northwest. Visibility rapidly changed from 0 to 3 miles and back to 0. We cranked against the advancing sea all day without sighting a plume of smoke or even a masthead. As darkness fell again, the men in the boat heard a sharp detonation ahead to port. A second one followed. It sounded like typical torpedo hits. Another wolf had infiltrated the flock. An hour and 16 miles later we spotted the first shadows. For 20 minutes Paulson followed the black silhouettes. The XO locked in the target data and had the tubes thwarted. Suddenly thick fog rolled in and the targets dissolved into nothingness. Just as suddenly, a freighter emerged from the fog bank, bearing down directly on us. "Shadow at 240 degrees!" someone unnecessarily shouted. The gigantic bow of the ship was so close, so large, that only one option remained: fire and get away. The command was already given. "Tube 5, los!" U-557 sharply turned starboard to avoid a collision, and we waited and counted. 40 seconds. 60 seconds. But the torpedo had missed its mark. Only minutes after breaking away from the convoy, we ventured forth again, but the connection was and remained severed. When at 6:15 a.m. the faint grey of the new sky emerged, we were alone between heaven and sea. The men, tired and worn, slept or sat at battle stations. The food tasted terrible. The bread was moldy as usual, the salami was green and slimy. We washed down the bread with strong coffee that Café Berger in Frankfurt couldn't have brewed better. Sweat, condensed and salt water had soaked our clothes, the provisions were diluted and everything we touched was damp and sticky. We were dizzy from the eternal rocking and shaking of the boat, weak in the knees, numb from the cold and nearly deaf from the constant thundering of the diesel engines. But the hunt continued. With the day came rain again. All morning and half of the afternoon it struck us in the face and washed away the salt crusts. The convoy was and remained vanished, far behind the low-hanging clouds. We plowed through rain squalls into the approaching evening, and it was as if we were sailing into emptiness. The enemy contact was and remained severed. It appeared that the convoy had truly escaped us. With extensive search patterns we continued our hunt the next day, but we found absolutely no clue about the whereabouts of the convoy. In the evening, we reported to High Command the discontinuation of the pursuit, our location, weather and remaining fuel. Then we set course for our old hunting grounds. We sailed through choppy seas for 3 days, covering about 450 nautical miles. On the fourth night, a boat operating in the northernmost area sent the following short signal. Convoy AJ35, course east, speed 12 knots, Am attacking. This was the cue. We immediately changed course, despite our significantly reduced fuel supply, and like hussars, we charged into the old distant hunting grounds. Simultaneously, other boats decoded the signal and also turned north to intercept the convoy. But bad luck was not yet finished with us. High Command had other plans for us. We were directed to steer toward a different grid, leaving the prey to other boats closer to the convoy. The crew cursed like a shipload of pirates over spilled rum. As expected, a large wolf pack had intercepted a Halifax convoy. One torpedo after another crashed into the flanks of the convoy, sinking, destroying, decimating, and shattering the formation. Rapid short signals indicated one of the greatest convoy battles ever fought in the Atlantic. The radio messages piled up on the commander's narrow table, reflecting the fierceness of the attacks that sent ship after ship to the grave. The short signals were as clear and precise as the shots fired by the commanders. Some of them read: "All torpedoes fired. Sank 5, 24,000 tons. Returning to base." Another one said: "Sank 3, 18,000 tons. 2 more damaged. Maintaining contact." Another one: "Sank 2 freighters. Being depth charged. I have sustained damage. Setting course for repairs." The last one said: "Sank 4, 21,000 tons. In pursuit." The battle continued for 2 more nights and 2 days. During these hours of incessant sinking, we switched to our German transmitters and listened to the special bulletins. Then, the wolves lost sight of the enemy convoy in the northern fog, but not before they had littered the floor of the North Atlantic with 20 shattered and broken ship hulls. Time for the after-action report. Not much to say about the events in this episode, except that again it was really hard to edit, where the German version is just narrating along over the course of about 5 or 6 pages. The same events are spread out in fragments over no less than 15 pages in the English version, and they are out of sequence. In the event, it was way easier to just translate the original myself, which is what I've done. So don't worry, you will always get the correct account by Herbert. If you're wondering about the convoy that he's talking about, the one that gets attacked by other U-boats and suffers heavy losses, that was actually convoy OG-71, a convoy outbound for Gibraltar, hence the letters OG, and in fact not a Halifax convoy. In total, this convoy lost 10 ships with about 15,000 tons, after being attacked by 8 U-boats in total over the course of several days. The tonnage claim by the U-boat captains that we've heard about was just a bit exaggerated, and it was quite common that torpedo hits were counted multiple times by different boats during the attacks because of all the commotion and confusion. So that's it for this episode. Enjoy the rest of your day, and as usual, like, comment, subscribe, and thank you for your support. Cheers!